Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Derek and Craig. I figured today's topic would be safe hunting discussion, kind of, sort of. Craig and I, we kind of go talk about everything else, but safety is a concern this time of year, really any time, Craig. I mean, we get into situations and we're out in the field alone or whatever, out in the woods, and a lot of times I like hunting like that. And Craig, I know you do too. Just to go out there and just go hunting and not have to worry about it, hanging out with anybody or whatever. Just kind of your time to just kind of listen, just kind of listen for the beep kind of thing, get away. And, sometimes you get into situations and, well, you can even get lost, Craig. I mean, I don't know if it's ever happened to you. It's happened to me a couple different times. You get turned around and you're just kind of just staring off into space, listening for that beep. And before you know it, man, you're all turned around. You don't even know which direction to walk in. That's one of the things that, I carry in my backpack here. I carry a compass, even though around where I'm at, I really can't get too lost in a lot of the places because, I got the river on one side, and of course I'll eventually hit, a road of some kind. But when you're hunting out like in Tennessee or, New Hampshire or whatever else, some of these tracts of land and wooded areas, man, they can go on for miles. And I've seen videos, there actually was a video a couple of years ago, a guy, and he actually videoed him. He goes, man, I'm lost. And it was like 6 hours or something. He was wandering. He finally wandered onto somebody's property eventually and figured out where he was. But, just carrying some basic stuff. And Brandon Stewart had called in. I think Bill Marsh had too. And, we carry stuff with us. If you're, kind of newer to the hobby, or whatever, if maybe you've been a hunter, actual, physical, out there deer hunting or whatever else, that, situations, you never can walk in a straight line. You always have to walk around trees and this and that and the other thing, and you can get yourself all turned around. So carrying a compass is probably a pretty good thing. And, at least a bottle of water, especially this time of year, Craig. I mean, it's so brutally, the heat index is so high right now, at least where I'm at and where you're at. You can get dehydrated, heat stroke, whatever. This happens to anybody. This can happen to anybody. I mean, whether you're young or old, it can overtake you. And, if you don't know the warning signs or you don't know yourself, how you react to that kind of situation, as far as, physically, I mean, it could be dangerous. I mean, downright dangerous. You don't want to get heat stroke. I've been to that point several times. Once you experience it, I guess once or twice, you kind of know, okay, well, I'm starting to, sweat too much. It's actually when you stop sweating, Craig, is what I heard when heat stroke kicks in. You start sweating a lot, and then all of a sudden you won't sweat anymore, and that's when you really have to watch. I think you've been in that situation a couple times because you played tennis and track and field and all that stuff throughout the years, and I tell you, man, it's not something you want to experience. And now, we're not even talking just, the U.S. I mean, I'm sure, Australia or whatever, I see some of the guys on Gavin's on here and the Yard Diggers and Brandon from New York there, Newfane, New York. It's stuff that you guys probably think about it too, because you guys are, pretty much been hunting a long time too. Just for the newer people, I get so in the zone when I'm out detecting, Craig. That's always been my nemesis. I lose track of time. I mean, I think I've been out for an hour or two, and I've been out for 4 or 5 hours sometimes. You just get in such a zone.
I was watching a video actually this morning, and it was from Earl in Virginia. It's just our show.
Yeah.
He lives, I don't know, 9 to 11 miles from me in Winchester, and I've been watching his videos for a long time, but he hadn't been out in a while. And he and a guy went to a construction site I think at 6 in the morning, and by about 9 or 10 they were through because and Earl was showing his face. He looked like his face was so pale. You sometimes you get out there and instead of turning red, you start getting pale almost. I've actually had it where I almost got cold. even though it's hot, because you just you stop sweating almost. But anyway, he found a really nice stirrup and stuff, but it was a construction site with no shade or anything. But as soon as the sun starts hitting you, even if it's in the morning, he said by three o'clock. After about 3 hours, he was pretty much done. But it looked like a pretty good site. But it's like I've been hunting in my yard a little bit, and I try to get under a tree.
Oh yeah.
Sun off me, but I've been out. As far as getting lost in the woods, I've gotten turned around a few times in the past, and I had to learn woodcraft, when I started really relic hunting, and I was lucky. The guy that I was hunting with, he was a deer hunter, and he'd been doing it for a long time, and he, was very good in the woods. He actually made me lead the way back to the car a few times after we, hiked like 2 or 3 miles back in the woods, and we were hunting all day. And I started realizing I had to be aware of where the sun was, and that way I could tell east and west and north and south pretty much. And also started taking like a compass reading, sometimes on which way I was going.
No, it's really important. I could have it.
Yeah, but the other one was I found this cavalry camp one time way back in the middle of nowhere, and I'd found this cannonball, and I decided to start exploring this other side of the woods away from it. And this whole area now has been completely logged, and there's actually a couple archaeological little parks, I guess, in there. But Union Army camped all over this whole area, just all up and down these creeks and stuff. And so I found I could tell the place had been hunted. And there was little kind of depressions in the ground, but there weren't really hut sites, it didn't look like. So it might have been like more of a surface camp or something for the cavalry. But I got a Eagle C button, and I think a cuff button, and I got a Sharps bullet, and I kept following this thing, and I saw this ridge off in the distance, and I thought, man, that looks good. And I went up there, and it was a series of ridges, and all of a sudden I'm walking up this hill, and I see a hut site, and so I started hunting. I got up on top, and there was a whole bunch of hut sites, and there was nothing up there at all. Just no signals at all. So I said, well, it's probably been hunted, but there might be something around. So I came down the hill again, and just on this one right little edge of the hill, I dug probably 10 eagle buttons and a couple knapsack hooks, no bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the buttons are fairly deep. And I remember I started, working my way back, and all of a sudden I didn't know where the hell I was. And so
yep.
I walked for probably a half an hour, 45 minutes, and there's nothing that makes you feel more alive than when you're lost.
Oh, I know. You start, you can actually put yourself, and, fortunately, I don't really panic, but I've known people that, that I've hunted, they start panicking. Where's, obviously if you're not hunting with somebody, you're out there alone and you're in the middle of, I don't know, couple, 300 or 400 or 500 acres or whatever, you kind of know your boundaries. If you know your area you're hunting, but if you're out in the middle, some of these places, you could, I always bring up Brandon because I know the way he hunts, he's always said that he'll hike in and he brings enough, to survive, basically survive for a day or two, because he travels like 3 miles back into the woods. When you're that far in there, you can really get yourself into a situation. Matter of fact, one of his friends, I guess, was hunting, and it got overcast, so he couldn't even see the sun, and he was there in a rainstorm, middle of the woods, hunkered down for, I can't remember how many hours it was, but yeah, you can get frightened. Keep your head, don't freak out. I mean, you just got to think about where you've been. And I always try to look at, different, obviously crossing into a field, into the woods, you're looking at different things to kind of mark them in your mind where you're at, so that when you're walking back through, you might spot something, maybe it's a certain kind of tree or fence poles, whatever. Gavin's on here saying that, in his younger days, he used to carry a snake bite kit. Always seemed to cross paths with the red-bellied black snakes, which I'm guessing are poisonous or whatever in Australia. You can wear some of the equipment. Some people wear snake bite, guards on their legs and stuff, depending on what part of the country you're in, like Louisiana, or even Florida. I mean, I've never really, knock on wood, never really had a problem with snakes. I've come across rattlesnakes before. It always seems like, you're metal detecting, your coil's out there. So that's where the motion is. If you disturb them, I mean, more than likely, I would think they would strike at the coil. That's what I've had them do. And usually they'd sooner run from you most of the time, and you'll hear them. The rattlesnakes, obviously, but, the water moccasins and stuff, you really got to watch, because you'll step right on them. You got to really watch where you're walking, especially if you get near a water source. They're ambush hunters, kind of like what copperheads are. Yesterday, a couple days ago when I was out there with Will at the Toll Bridge property, he's, his pontoon boat, has a leak in one of the pontoons, and, we need to get this up on the shore so I can, fix this. And I said, well, I'll help you out. And he's tromping around down by the river, didn't even look. And I had to grab a hold of him and said, man, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm just going to go down here and see where I can tie this thing up. I said, man, look down on the ground. And about, 3 or 4 foot ahead of him was a water moccasin. He would have stepped right on it. And he's out there in, pretty much, I call them Jesus sandals, whatever, the sandals or whatever. Oh, I didn't even think about that. I said, man, you got gators. The gators will lie, 2 or 3 foot from the water. They can come out of the water at 35 mile an hour. You're not even going to have time to react most of the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got to, that's not even to mention, I mean, like, I go by down here because I hunt down here all the time, but, we have bobcats, we have, bears. I've never seen one in this area, but right on the other side of that river, I know I've seen black bear. And, you become prey, you become the pork chop, so to speak, in a given situation. If I'm seeing wild turkeys and deer, out there, different spots, I start really looking for, other animals that can actually do me some harm. I mean, I carry, a 38 with me most of the time when I'm out there, because I am by myself, and we have a lot of wild hogs, boars, whatever. I've never had to, use it, and it's not something that, it depends on what state you're in and everything. It depends on your situation and where you're hunting at. In the fields, you're out in the open. I mean, you're going to see stuff starting to want to come at you. I've never had a situation. Usually it's always in the woods or in the swampy area or whatever, is where you have to really watch, because you're not going to see this stuff. I mean, and the biggest thing too is running. Don't run from this stuff, man. I mean, like bears and cats and stuff like that, they'll, you're just they're going to chase you down. You're not going to get away from them. I mean, you almost have to stand your ground or make noise or whatever. I mean, you see them do this a lot, and you watch those Alaska shows and stuff, and these are kind of extreme conditions, but in your country too, I'm like, Gavin is in Australia. I have no idea, what the heck can get you over there. There's always dangers out there. Just make yourself aware. I've always tried to, have a plan in my head. If I, trip and fall and break my leg or something, it's like carrying a cell phone. I mean, it sucks depending on what kind of detector you have. Carrying a cell phone when you're hunting alone, it's like hunting alone. You don't want to really do it all the time, but if at least have a way of communicating with somebody. If you do get in, hurt yourself, fall, hit your head, whatever, and get disoriented, you have a way of getting in contact with somebody. I'll carry my cell phone sometimes and turn it off. And fortunately enough, it doesn't really seem to affect my metal detector. Some of them it will, or it does, where you'll get feedback through your metal detector. But you always can turn it off, put it in your pocket or fine bag or something like that. Have a way to communicate with people. And of course, tell somebody you're going out. I always tell my wife, I'm going to be hunting until about 1 or 2 o'clock, something like that. And then I'll be back. And I'm only a mile from the house, but, I'm out in the middle of 500 acres and nobody else is out there and there's no access to the public as far as them coming through. It can get pretty bad. You have heat stroke, pass out, whatever, wake up disoriented, whatever. You just try to cover your butt. I don't care how old you are. You could be, a 15-year-old kid and think you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Let me tell you something. It'll scare the bejeebies out of you if you haven't been in that situation before. Just be smart about it. It's something that, I don't know, Craig, when I was younger, I was always, living for some kind of adventure, wandering here, wandering there in the woods or out, whatever, doesn't matter. But I always had some kind of a way, I don't know, it was always in the back of my mind, I guess. You just, what am I going to do if something happens out here? Or, you're exploring, a tunnel system or something like that. You got to use your head. You're going to find out real quick you're not 10 feet tall. You can get hurt, and you don't want to. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be a victim of your own stupidity, I guess, sometimes. But yeah, I mean, it's. Go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
I used to walk up, this big creek in Stafford all the time, and I remember Mike and I would walk up there, and we knew there was probably camps up that way, and that we'd just keep walking further and further, and then kind of checking a little bit off, on areas that look good. But I remember I went up there by myself one time, and I hiked another mile. I was probably a good 2.5 miles, 3 miles up the creek, and I started picking up some stuff, and I wandered up this hill, and then I walked through this really thick place where it was hard to swing a coil, and I found a couple buttons in there, and I walked on through, and there was a trench on the other side, and I thought, that is weird. There's just a trench in the middle of nowhere, and there's no camp or anything. And I said, there's got to be something around here. Then I got turned around, and it was kind of a cloudy day too, and you can't see the sun. And back then I didn't have cell phones, and,
mm-hmm.
I carried a compass, but after I got lost really bad the first time, I decided, I got to take a compass reading, at least, showing where I came from, and but the trouble is, if you walk up a creek, the creek kind of meanders back and forth a bit, and you don't even really realize it, especially when it's really a thick woods. And usually right along the creek is where you find all these thick bushes and stuff, because there's a lot of water.
Yeah.
But it's pretty pretty funny because if you really want to find stuff, you got to kind of hike to places where people don't normally go.
Yeah, the road less traveled.
It was like, we knew there was camps all over Stafford County because there was 150,000 troops that had camped there after the Battle of Fredericksburg through the whole winter.
Mm-hmm.
And, they basically the whole county, was, covered in troops, just regiment after regiment. And they, a lot of times would have to move after about 6 months because not even 6 months, after a few months, because they depleted all the wood. There wasn't any wood left to burn, and you had to have plenty of wood. It was like where I lived in Alexandria. I lived on the highest point in Tidewater, Virginia, and there was a fort up on top of that hill.
Mm-hmm.
And I read in a diary that after the Union soldiers that there was the first year of the war, there was camps all over Alexandria. I mean, they were just they were on every hill, it's just everywhere. And so you get out there and you don't know exactly what you're going to pick up, but just about every yard in my neighborhood there was bullets and stuff all over the place. But
yep.
the soldiers we read stories where they would travel. They would walk around because they were bored and they were in a camp and didn't have anything to do, so they would kind of walk around and find people's houses and cabins and beg for food and maybe get a drink of water and stuff like that. And they drop stuff at those places too. So, way away from the camps, there was, you would find like a little cabin site in the middle of the woods. There was nothing visible, but you could hear the nails in the ground, and you'd start finding, buttons and stuff, that the soldiers dropped around that, camp and stuff. So, hey, it's just, it was like my neighbors, they couldn't understand how there was bullets and stuff and, up there at the Masonic Temple or, around that area. And they go, there wasn't any battles around here, were there? And I cut, no, the whole army camped here, after they came across the river in May of 1861. They basically invaded Alexandria, and then it was a railroad hub, and they ended up taking it over and using it to ship all their munitions and stuff all over the place.
Right.
So they basically put forts all over Alexandria and Arlington, in a line all around D.C. It even goes all the way up through Maryland and stuff. It was like 72 forts and batteries.
That's crazy. That's a lot of area.
So, jeez. I've got pictures where they actually used the black slaves to build, most of the earthworks and stuff for, a lot of these batteries and forts.
Right.
Matthew Brady was a photographer. There was a couple photographers, but Matthew Brady actually he followed the armies around, was taking photos, and he was actually up on the hill, where the fort was, and took photos all over Alexandria even. So
right.
It's really fascinating. Some of the places, some of the buildings are still there. One of them that upsets me was the Marshall House, which they had this giant Confederate flag was made for the guy that owned the tavern, and his name was James Jackson, and he flew this thing off the top of his tavern or his hotel or whatever it was, but he supposedly Abraham Lincoln could see that the flag from the White House over in D.C., which is like 5 miles away, and he had this spyglass, and it really upset him, and he wanted that flag taken down. So when they invaded Alexandria, they one of the groups with Colonel Ellsworth, who became a martyr, and that fort is named after him, right, up near my house in Alexandria. He came up and with a guy named Corporal Browning. They walked up, and he went up to the top and stole the flag, and then got shot.
Oh, I've seen that. I've heard that story on TV, actually, a documentary. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool. A lot of history around you, Craig. Ton of it.
Yeah, Corporal Browning ended up bayoneting and shot and bayoneted Jim Jackson and killed him. But Jim Jackson, I guess, took out Ellsworth with a shotgun. But they came at 5, like at dawn, nobody, and he just walked into the tavern and walked to the top. And I guess, Jackson heard him and got his gun and was waiting behind it was funny when he came down to the, from the landing upstairs, he comes down and he has the flag, and he goes, "Behold my trophy." And so Jim Jackson, stepped out behind the doorway and just blasted him, says, "Behold mine." So then Colonel Browning came up and, killed him, and then, that became they became the two first martyrs of the Civil War, actually, one for the South and one for the North.
Right.
But, and then the soldiers all wanted to come up and see the fort, because because it was one of the first ones built when they got to Alexandria. That was one of the first places they wanted to visit. The other place was a couple miles away along the Potomac was George Washington's home, Mount Vernon. And there was two ladies that took care of George Washington's property, and it was in disrepair, and they were trying to, keep it up. And you think, God, this is, 1860. It's like, wasn't that long after the, George Washington's era, that, here it is, the house is falling apart almost. So when the Union soldiers wanted to come up and tour the house, and they started advertising it, but they made them pay 10 cents each to come in the house and look around. And so they used the money to, start restoring the house.
Right.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. But, everybody, all the Union soldiers wanted to see where, George Washington. They also went to Christ Church, which is kind of on the same road that goes down to Mount Vernon. If you just keep on going down that road. But he had a silver, he had a pew, and they put a silver plaque with his name on it. And when the war broke out, the ministers or whatever got in the church, and they unscrewed that thing and hid it, and they actually buried it in a courtyard, and because they knew that some Union soldier would probably steal it, when they went to church.
Yeah.
But and then after the war, they dug it up, put it back on. But a lot of history was in Alexandria, and a lot of people don't realize it was the first city that was invaded during the Civil War.
Right. Yeah.
And it was totally unexpected. There was no warning or anything. They just attacked,
different time.
Later on, my grandfather, worked for the railroad as a welder and stuff. And when World War II broke out, he started welding, became a welder at the Torpedo Factory, which is now a big fine arts building. And my niece has a jewelry business in there, and it's right on the river. I mean, you look out the windows and you're right up to the edge of the river there. Beautiful spot, but it's a huge building, goes for like 3 or 4 blocks, and they built all the torpedoes for World War II in there. So it's I have I don't know if my brother has it or not, but he actually made little miniature torpedoes on a stand, replicas. And we have one.
Yeah.
So I imagine my brother grabbed it.
Oh, yeah.
I was looking for it before we moved. I wanted to have it. I got some other pretty good artifacts from the family and stuff. Like I got the daguerreotypes of the actual soldiers that my relatives that died in Pickett's Charge. And they had their uniforms on in the picture, and they actually painted on the picture the buttons gold with little gold gilding, I guess, on the buttons.
Yeah, I got a few things my grandfather gave my dad. It was like a tank round from the projectile or whatever from a World War II tank, a Sherman tank or something like that. That's hanging around my mom's house right now. I haven't brought it here yet. I need to get a picture of that. It was pretty cool. Years. I mean, it's funny what we kind of keep and mementos and this and that. A lot of guys have like trench art and stuff like that from the different wars and they have that laying around. And I don't know, it's a lot of character. Some people pay big money for that stuff. I see a lot of engravings and stuff on big brass projectiles or whatever, cannonballs, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, but they're all kind of neat. They all tell a little story. We're right here at the top of the show here, Craig. It's 7:30, but we kind of got off topic a little bit. But Gavin did bring up a good point. You have a shovel, guys, and don't be afraid to use it if you need to. You're out there, and our shovels are pretty aggressive. And if you had to, some kind of critter coming after you or whatever else, you're gonna I'd keep a hold of that and drop the detector probably, but that's why they call it predator tools,
Well, when the Russians invaded, when the Germans invaded Russia during World War II, they did all that urban warfare in the city, and they used
whatever they had,
trenching shovels.
Yep.
And they just hacked the hell out of these, Germans. They would, they would wait in the doorways, and as soon as they come by, they just jump out and just hack them, because it was close in fighting,
Yeah, it's hand-to-hand combat essentially. Yeah.
And that weapon just devastated. It's a heck of a weapon.
I've never really worried about it. I figure, anybody come after you, I've never had it happen. I've heard some guys have, even on beaches and stuff like that. I mean, who's going to mess with you? Even the trowels we use or the knives, when we get stuff out of the ground. If you carry one of those, that's a pretty intimidating little piece of equipment right there. Nobody's going to mess with you really. I've never had a problem, but I guess you just got to know your environment, what you're around and stuff. Some of these cities and areas in the city that you might be hunting, or you're more apt to have a problem there than in the middle of the field. But you hear, lock up your cars and stuff like that. Don't leave anything out in your car that people can see. I mean, I've heard horror stories. People's windows getting broken, detectors being stolen. When they're at a site trying to hunt. Know your environment and don't leave stuff out in the open. That should go unspoken really. And we didn't even touch on, the critters, the little bugs, the chiggers, the ticks, there's stuff you can, wear, and keep them away from you. You don't want to, there's several guys and gals on here that have gotten Lyme's disease and everything else from these ticks. And it's a real problem when you're, tromping around in the woods and stuff like that. So, try to protect yourself the best you can as far as the insects go. I mean, it goes without saying.
When I first started, we didn't even have to worry about limes. It was up in Jersey, and it's just kind of migrated all the way down. I think it's all over the whole country now.
It's down in Florida. Yeah, I know that. Not to mention mosquitoes and all that.
You know how it got spread? Birds.
I have no doubt about that. Birds spread a lot of stuff like that, but
birds, they get on the birds, and then the bird flies somewhere, and then they drop off, and they hitchhike on another bird. It's like they've hitchhiked all over the whole country. It seems like.
Yeah, this is a topic that can go on and on, Craig. This, safety and stuff. We may do another show about it, but just use some common sense. Be aware of your surroundings. No matter whether it's in the woods or in a city street, you just got to kind of, watch yourself and, use some common sense. Young or old doesn't really matter. It applies to everybody. And, have fun, but be safe about it. I guess we'll wrap up here a little bit. I did see we have John. I'm going to call him John because that's what he told me to call him. He's in Tokyo, Japan. He's listening in. I think this is a guy you were talking to, Craig, on chat or whatever. Yeah, he's tuned in. He's on a bus somewhere, and then I saw Yardifact Digger. I think that's what he goes by. He's over there. He's at the beach right now. He just got to the beach, and I think he's gonna do some beach detecting. Gavin's on today. I think I saw Bill or Bob D's on. I think I saw Bill on here somewhere. Maybe I didn't. Brandon from New York. So there are a lot of guys on chat right there. I don't know if we're going to do a show on Wednesday or not, guys. I may do an archive show. I'll kind of have to let you know as the week goes on. It's got a crazy week ahead. But we'll definitely be on Friday. And, of course, we'll do our Thursday night show, too. But be sure to like and follow the shows, and that way you get some alerts. You'll know you'll get an email or something like that the show's going to go live or whatever at whatever time, whenever I post it up. So, you remember, because I lose track of the day so bad, Craig, it's not even funny anymore. So, but we'll wrap it up for today, guys. If you're out there working, driving, whatever, be safe. If you're able to get out and play hooky from work and go metal detecting and all, that's important. And you just tell your boss I said it's okay. I don't know if it's going to get you anything. Probably get you fired, but I don't know. Invite your boss out to metal detect. That way the whole company takes a day off.
If you metal detect, it's best to be self-employed.
Yeah, no kidding. It's addictive, man. It's the best habit you'll ever have, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Craig, I'll talk to you later, brother. I got to get going. You guys have a safe day. Keep digging, and God bless.